Good evening, my friends. It's Indiana Holmes, and tonight we continue with our new book, The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. We begin tonight with Chapter 3, Three Women. When Spade reached his office at 10 o'clock the following morning, Effie Perrine was at her desk opening the morning mail. Her boyish face was pale under its sunburn. She put down the handful of envelopes and brass paper knife she held and said, "She's in there." Her voice was low and warning. "I asked you to keep her away," Spade complained. He, too, kept his voice low. Effie Perrine's brown eyes opened wide, and her voice was irritable as his. "Yes, but you didn't tell me how." Her eyelids went together a little, and her shoulders drooped. "Don't be cranky, Sam," she said wearily. "I had her all night." Spade stood beside the girl, put his hand on her head, and smoothed her hair away from its parting. "Sorry, Angel, I haven't." He broke off as his inner doorbell rang. "Hello, Iva," he said to the woman who had opened it. "Oh, Sam," she said. She was a blonde woman of a few more years than 30. Her facial prettiness was perhaps 5 years past its moment. Her body, for all its sturdiness, was finely modeled and exquisite. She wore black clothes from hat to shoes. They had as morning an impromptu air. Having spoken, she stepped back from the door and stood waiting for Spade. He took his hand from Effie Perrine's head and entered the inner office, shutting the door. Iva came quickly to him, raising her sad face for a kiss. Her arms were around him before his held her. When they had kissed, he made a little movement as if to release her, but she pressed her face to his chest and began sobbing. He stroked her around back, saying, "Poor darling." His voice was tender, his eyes squinting at the desk and what had been his partner's across the room from his own, and they were angry. He drew his lips back over his teeth in an impatient grimace and turned his chin aside to avoid contact with the crown of her hat. "Did you send for Miles' brother?" he asked. "Yes, he came over this morning." The words were blurred by her sobbing and his coat against her mouth. He grimaced again and bent his head for a surreptitious look at the watch on his wrist. His left arm was around her and the hand on her left shoulder. His cuff was pulled back far enough to leave the watch uncovered. It showed 10:10. The woman stirred in his arms and raised her face again. Her blue eyes were wet, round, and white-ringed. Her mouth was moist. "Oh, Sam," she moaned. "Did you kill him?" Spade stared at her with bulging eyes. His bony jaw fell down. He took his arms from her and stepped back out of her arms. He scowled at her and cleared his throat. She held her arms up as he had left. Anguish clouded her eyes, partly closed them under her eyebrows, pulled up at the inner ends. Her soft, damp, red lips trembled. Spade laughed a harsh syllable, "Ha!" and went off to the bluff-curtained window. He stood there with his back to her, through the curtain into the court until she stared towards him. Then he turned quickly and went to his desk. He sat down, put his elbow on the desk, his chin between his fists, and looked at her. His yellowish eyes glittered between narrowed lids. "Who," he asked coldly, "put that bright idea into your head?" "I thought—" She lifted a hand to her mouth, and fresh tears came to her eyes. She came to stand beside the desk, moving with an easy, sure-footed grace in black slippers, whose smallness and heel height were extreme. "Be kind to me, Sam," she said humbly. He laughed at her, his eyes still glittering. "You killed my husband, Sam. Be kind to me." He clapped his palms together and said, "Jesus Christ." She began to cry audibly, holding a white handkerchief to her face. He got up and stood close behind her. He put his arms around her. He kissed her neck between the ear and the coat collar. He said, "Now, Iva, don't." His face was expressionless. When she had stopped crying, he put his mouth to her ear and murmured, "You shouldn't have come here today, precious. It wasn't wise. You can't stay. You ought to be gone. You ought to go home." She turned round in his arms to face him and asked, "You'll come tonight?" He shook his head gently. "Not tonight." "Soon?" "Yes." "How soon?" "As soon as I can." He kissed her mouth, led her to the door, opened it, and said, "Goodbye, Iva," bowed her out, shut the door, and returned to his desk. He took tobacco and cigarette papers from his vest pocket, but did not roll a cigarette. He sat holding the papers in one hand, the tobacco in the other, looked with brooding eyes at his dead partner's desk. Effie Perrine opened the door and came in. Her brown eyes were uneasy. Her voice was careless. She asked, "Well?" Spade said nothing. His brooding gaze did not move from his partner's desk. The girl frowned and came around to his side. "Well?" she asked in a louder voice. "How did you and the widow make out?" "She still thinks I shot Miles," he said. Only his lips moved. "So you could marry her?" Spade made no reply to that. The girl took his hat from his head and put it on the desk. Then she leaned over and took the tobacco sack and the papers from his inert fingers. "The police think I shot Thorsby," he said. "Who is he?" she asked, separating a cigarette paper from the packet, sifting the tobacco into it. "Who do you think I shot?" he asked. When she ignored the question, he said, "Thursby's the guy Miles was supposed to be tailing for the Wonderly girl." Her thin fingers finished shaping the cigarette. She licked it, smoothed it, twisted its ends, and placed it between Spade's lips. He said, "Thanks, honey," put an arm around her slim waist, and rested his cheek wearily against her hip, shutting his eyes. "Are you going to marry Iva?" she asked, looking down at his pale brown hair. "Don't be silly," he muttered. The unlighted cigarette bobbed up and down with each movement of his lips. "She doesn't think it's silly. Why should she, the way you've played around with her?" He sighed and said, "I wish to Christ I'd never seen her." "Maybe you do now." A trace of spitefulness came from the girl's voice. "But there was a time." "I never know what to do or say to women except that way," he grumbled. "And then I didn't like Miles." "That's a lie, Sam," the girl said. "You know I think she's a louse, but I'd be a louse too if it would give me a body like hers." Spade rubbed his face impatiently against her hip, but said nothing. Effie Perrine bit her lip, wrinkled her forehead, and, bending over for a better view of his face, asked, "Do you suppose she could have killed him?" Spade sat straight up, took his arm from her waist. He smiled at her. His smile held nothing but amusement. He took out his lighter, snapped on the flame, and applied it to the end of the cigarette. "You're an angel," he said tenderly, through the smoke. "A nice, rattle-brained angel." She smiled a bit wryly. "Oh, I am." "Suppose I told you that your Iva hadn't been home many minutes when I arrived to break the news at 3 o'clock this morning." "Are you telling me?" he asked. His eyes had become alert, though his mouth continued to smile. "She kept me waiting at the door while she undressed or finished undressing. I saw her clothes where she had dumped them on a chair. Her hat and coat were underneath. Her singlet on top was still warm. She said she had been sleeping, but she hadn't. She had wrinkled up the bed, but the wrinkles weren't mashed down." Spade took the girl's hand and patted it. "You're a detective, darling, but—" He shook his head. "She didn't kill him." Effie Perrine snatched her hand away. "That louse wants to marry you, Sam," she said bitterly. He made an impatient gesture with his head and one hand. She frowned at him and demanded, "Did you see her last night?" "No. Honestly?" "Honestly." "Don't act like Dundee, sweetheart. It ill becomes you." "Has Dundee been after you?" "Uh-huh. He and Tom Polhas dropped in for a drink at 4 o'clock. Do they really think you shot this, what's his name? Thursby?" He dropped what was left of his cigarette into a brass tray and began to roll another. "Do they?" she insisted. "God knows." His eyes were on the cigarette he was making. They did have some such notion. I don't know how far I talked them out of it. Look at me, Spade. Look at me. He looked at her and laughed, so that for a moment merriment mingled with anxiety in her face. You worry me, she said, seriousness returning to her face as she talked. You always think you know what you're doing, but you're too slick for your own good, and someday you're going to find it out. He sighed mockingly and rubbed his cheek against her arm. That's what Dundee says, but you keep Iva away from me, sweet, and I'll manage to survive the rest of my troubles. He stood up and put his hat on. Have the Spade and Archer taken off the door and Samuel Spade put on. I'll be back in an hour, or phone you. Spade went through the St. Mark's long purplish lobby to the desk and asked a red-haired dandy whether Miss Wonderly was in. The red-haired dandy turned away, and then, back shaking his head, she checked out this morning, Mr. Spade. Thanks. Spade walked past the desk to an alcove off the lobby where a plump young middle-aged man in dark clothes sat at a flat-topped mahogany desk. On the edge of the desk facing the lobby was a triangular prism of mahogany and brass inscribed Mr. Freed. The plump man got up and came around the desk holding out his hand. I was awfully sorry to hear about Archer, Spade, he said in a tone trained to sympathize readily without intrusiveness. I've just seen it in the call. He was in here last night, you know. Thanks, Freed. Were you talking to him? No. He was sitting in the lobby when I came in early this evening. I didn't stop. I thought he was probably working, and I know you fellows like to be left alone when you're busy. Did that have anything to do with his? I don't think so, but we don't know yet. Anyway, we won't mix up the house and if it can be helped. Thanks. That's all right. You can give me some dope on an ex-guest and then forget that I asked you for it. Surely. A Miss Wonderly checked out this morning. I'd like to know the details. Come along, Freed said, and we'll see what we can learn. Spade stood still, shaking his head. I don't want to show in it. Freed nodded and went out of the alcove. In the lobby, he halted suddenly and came back to Spade. Harriman was the house detective on duty last night, he said. He's sure to have seen Archer. Shall I caution him not to mention it? Spade looked at Freed from the corners of his eyes. Better not. That won't make any difference as long as there's no connection shown with this Wonderly. Harriman's all right, but he likes to talk, and I'd as lief not to have him think that there's anything to be kept quiet. Freed nodded and went away. 15 minutes later, he returned. She arrived last Thursday. No, it was Tuesday. She arrived last Tuesday, registering from New York. She hadn't a trunk, only some bags. There were no phone calls charged to her room, and she doesn't seem to have received much, if any, mail. The only one anybody remembers having seen her was a tall, dark man of 36 or so. She went out 9:30 this morning and came back an hour later, paid her bill, and had her bags carried out to a car. The boy who carried them says it was a Nash touring car, probably a hired one. She left a forwarding address, the Ambassador, Los Angeles. Spade said, "Thanks a lot, Freed," and left the St. Mark. When Spade returned to his office, Effie Perrine stopped typing the letter to tell him, "Your friend Dundee was in. He wanted to look at your guns. And I told him to come back when you were here. Good girl. If he comes back again, let him look at him." And Miss Wonderly called up. "It's about time. What did she say?" "She wants to see you." The girl picked up a slip of paper from the desk and read the memorandum penciled in it. "She's at the Coronet on California Street, apartment 1001. You're to ask for Miss LeBlanc." Spade said, "Give me," and he held out his hand. When she had given him the memorandum, he took out his lighter, snapped on the flame, set it to the slip of paper, held the paper until all but one corner was curling black ash, dropped it on the linoleum floor, and mashed it under his shoe sole. The girl watched him with disapproving eyes. He grinned at her and said, "That's just the way it is, dear," and went out again. Chapter 4. The Blackbird. Miss Wonderly, in a belted green crepe silk dress, opened the door of the apartment 1001 at Coronet. Her face was flushed. Her dark red hair, parted on the left side, swept back in loose waves over the right temple, was somewhat tousled. Spade took off his hat and said, "Good morning." His smile brought a fainter smile to her face. Her eyes of blue, that was almost violet, did not lose their troubled look. She lowered her head and said, in a hushed, timid voice, "Come in, Mr. Spade." She led him past the open kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom doors into a cream and red living room, apologizing for its confusion. "Everything is upside down, and I haven't even finished unpacking." She laid his hat on the table and sat down on a walnut settee. He sat on a brocade oval-backed chair facing her. She looked at her fingers, working them together, and said, "Mr. Spade, I've a terrible, terrible confession to make." Spade smiled a polite smile, which she did not lift her eyes to see, and said nothing. "That? The story I told you yesterday was, well, it was all a story," she stammered, and looked up at him, now with miserable, frightened eyes. "Oh, that," Spade said lightly. "We didn't exactly believe your story." Then perplexity was added to the misery and the fright in her eyes. "We believed your $200. You mean," she seemed not to know what he meant, "I mean that you paid us more than if you'd been telling the truth," he explained blandly, "and enough more to make it all right." Her eyes suddenly lighted up. She lifted herself a few inches from the settee, settled down again, smoothed her skirt, leaned forward, and spoke eagerly. "And even now you'd be willing to—" Spade stopped her with the palm up motion of his hand. The upper part of his face frowned. The lower part smiled. "That depends," he said. "The hell of it is, Miss... Is your name Wonderly or LeBlanc?" She blushed and murmured, "It's really O'Shaughnessy. Bridget O'Shaughnessy." "The hell it is, Miss O'Shaughnessy, that a couple of murders," she winced, "coming together like this, get everybody stirred up, make the police think they can go the limit, make everybody hard to handle and expensive. It's not." He stopped talking because she had stopped listening and was waiting for him to finish. "Mr. Spade, tell me the truth." Her voice quivered on the verge of hysteria. Her face had become haggard around the desperate eyes. "Am I to blame for last night?" Spade shook his head. "Not unless there are things I don't know about," he said. "You warned us that Thursby was dangerous. Of course you lied to us about your sister and all, but that doesn't count. We didn't believe you." He shrugged his sloping shoulders. "I wouldn't say it was your fault." She said, "Thank you," very softly, and then she moved her head from side to side. "But I'll always blame myself." She put a hand to her throat. "Mr. Archer was so alive yesterday afternoon, so solid and hearty and—" "Stop it," Spade commanded. He knew what he was doing. "They're the chances we take. Was he married?" "Yes, with 10,000 insurance, no children, and a wife who didn't like him." "Oh, please don't," she whispered. Spade shrugged again. "That's the way it was." He glanced at his watch and moved from the chair to the settee beside her. "There's no time for worrying about that now." His voice was pleasant but firm. "Out there, a flock of policemen and assistant district attorneys and reporters are running around with their noses to the ground. What do you want to do?" "I want you to save me from it all," she replied in a thin, tremulous voice. She put a timid hand on his sleeve. "Mr. Spade, do they know about me?" "Not yet. I wanted to see you first. What would they think if they knew about the way I came to you with those lies?" "It would make them suspicious. That's why I've been stalling them till I could see you. I thought maybe you wouldn't, or we wouldn't have to let them know of it at all. We ought to be able to fake a story that'll rock them to sleep if necessary. You don't think I had anything to do with the murders, do you?" Spade grinned and said, "I forgot to ask you that. Did you?" "No." "That's good. Now that we're going to tell the police." She squirmed on her end and on the settee, and her eyes wavered between heavy flashes as if trying to flail free from their gaze, and the great gaze of his, that is. She seemed smaller and very young and oppressed. "Must they know all about it? I mean, all of it?" she asked. "I think I'd rather die than that, Mr. Spade. I can't explain now, but can't you somehow manage so that you can shield me from them so I won't have to answer their questions? I don't think I could stand being questioned now. I think I'd rather die. Can't you, Mr. Spade?" "Maybe," he said, "but I'll have to know what it's all about." She went down on her knees, at his knees. She held her face up to him. Her face was wan, taut, and fearful over tight-clasped hands. "I haven't lived a good life," she cried. "I've been bad, worse than you could know. But I'm not all bad. Look at me, Mr. Spade. You know, I'm not all bad, don't you? You can see that, can't you? Then can't you trust me a little bit? Oh, I'm so alone and afraid, and I've got nobody to help me if you won't help me. I know I've no right to ask you to trust me if I won't trust you. I do trust you, but I can't tell you. I can't tell you now. Later I will, when I can. I'm afraid, Mr. Spade. I'm afraid of trusting you. I don't mean that. I do trust you, but I trusted Floyd, and I've nobody else, Mr. Spade. You can help me. You said you can help me. If I hadn't believed you could save me, I would have run away today instead of sending for you. If I thought anybody else could save me, would I be down on my knees like this? I know this isn't fair of me, but be generous, Mr. Spade. Don't ask me to be fair. You're strong, you're resourceful, you're brave. You can spare me some of the strength and resourcefulness and courage, surely. Help me, Mr. Spade. Help me, because I need help so badly, and because if you don't, where will I find anyone who can, no matter how willing? Help me. I have no right to ask you to help me blindly, but I do ask. Be generous, Mr. Spade. You can help me. Help me." Spade, who had held his breath through much of this speech, now emptied his lungs with a long, sighing exultation between pursed lips and said, "You won't need much of anybody's help. You're good. You're very good. It's chiefly your eyes. I think that throb you get in your voice when you say things like, 'Be generous, Mr. Spade.'" She jumped up on her feet. Her face crimsoned painfully, but she held her head erect, and she looked at Spade straight in the eyes. "I deserve that," she said. "I deserve it. But, oh, I did want your help so much. I do want it. I need it so much. And the lie was in the ways I said it, and not all of it in which what I said." She turned away, no longer holding herself erect. It's my own fault that you can't believe me now." Spade's face reddened, and he looked down at the floor, muttering, "Now you are dangerous." Bridget O'Shaughnessy went to the table and picked up his hat. She came back and stood in front of him, holding the hat, not offering it to him, but holding it there for him to take it if he wished. Her face was white and thin. Spade looked at his hat and asked, "What happened last night?" "Floyd, he came to the hotel at 9 o'clock, and we went out for a walk. I suggested that so Mr. Archer could see him. We stopped at a restaurant on Angiri Street. I think it was for supper and to dance, and came back to the hotel at about 12:30. Floyd left me at the door, and I stood and watched Mr. Archer follow him down the street on the other side." "Down? You mean towards Market Street?" "Yes." Do you know what they were doing in the neighborhood of Bush and Stockton where Archer was shot? Isn't that near where Floyd lived? No, it would be nearly a dozen blocks out of his way if he was going from your hotel to his. Well, what did you do after they had gone? I went to bed, and this morning, when I went out for breakfast, I saw headlines in the papers and read about, you know. Then I went to Union Square where I had seen automobiles for hire, and I got one and went to the hotel for my luggage. And after I found my room, my room had been searched yesterday. I knew I would have to move, and I found this place yesterday afternoon, so I came here, and then telephoned your office. Your room at the St. Mark was searched? He asked. Yes, while I was at your office. She bit her lip. I didn't mean to tell you that. That means I'm not supposed to question you about it. She nodded shyly. He frowned. She moved his hat a little in her hands. He laughed impatiently and said, Stop waving the hat in my face. Haven't I offered to do what I can? She smiled contritely, returned the hat to the table, and sat beside him on the settee again. He said, I've got nothing against trusting you blindly, except that I won't be able to do much, or much good, if I haven't some idea of what it's all about. For instance, I've got to have some sort of line on your Floyd Thursby. I met him in the Orient. She spoke slowly, looking down at a pointed finger tracing eights on the settee between them. We came here from Hong Kong last week. He had promised to help me. He took advantage of my helplessness and dependence on him to betray me. Betray you how? She shook her head and said nothing. Spade, frowning with impatience, asked, Why did you want him shadowed? I wanted to learn how far he'd gone. He wouldn't even let me know where he was staying. I wanted to find out what he was doing, whom he was meeting, things like that. Did he kill Archer? She looked up at him, surprised. Yes, certainly, she said. He had a Luger in a shoulder holster. Archer wasn't shot with a Luger. He had a revolver in his overcoat pocket, she said. You saw it. Oh, I've seen it often. I know he always carries one there. I didn't see it last night, but I know he never wears an overcoat without it. Why all the guns? He lived by them. There was a story in Hong Kong that he had come out there to the Orient as a bodyguard to a gambler who had to leave the States, and the gambler had since disappeared. They said Floyd knew about the disappearing, and I don't know. I do know that he always went heavily armed, and that he never went to sleep without covering the floor around his bed with crumpled newspapers so nobody could come silently into his room. You picked a nice sort of playmate. Only the sort of playmate that could have helped me, she said simply. If he'd been loyal. Yes, if. Spade pinched his lower lip between his finger and thumb and looked gloomily at her. The vertical creases over his nose deepened, drawing his brows together. How bad a hole are you actually in? As bad as it could be. Physical danger? I'm not heroic. I don't think there's anything worse than death. Then it's that. It's that as surely as we're sitting here. She shivered. Unless you help me. He took his fingers away from his mouth and ran them through his hair. I'm not... Christ, he said irritably. I can't work miracles out of thin air. He looked at his watch. The day's going, and you're giving me nothing to work with. Who killed Thursby? She put a crumpled handkerchief to her mouth and said, I don't know. Though your enemies or his? I don't know. His, I hope, but I'm afraid I don't know. How was he supposed to be helping you? Why did you bring him here from Hong Kong? She looked at him with frightened eyes, shook her head in silence. Her face was haggard and pitifully stubborn. Spade stood up, thrust his hands into his pockets of his jacket, scowled down at her. "This is hopeless," he said savagely. "I can't do anything for you. I don't know what you want done. I don't even know if you know what you want done." She hung her head and wept. He made a growling animal noise in his throat and went to the table for his hat. You won't," she begged in a small, choked voice, not looking up. "You won't go to the police?" "Go to them," he explained, his eyes bulging, his voice loud with rage. "They've been running me ragged since 4 o'clock this morning. I've made myself God knows how much trouble standing them off. For what? For some crazy notion that I can help you. I can't. I won't try." He put his hat on his head, pulled it down tight. "Go to them." "Go to them? All I've got to do is stand still, and they'll be swarming all over me. Well, I'll try to tell them what I know, and you'll have to take your chances." She rose from the settee and held herself straight in front of him, though her knees were trembling, and she held her white, panic-stricken face up high, though she couldn't hold the twitching muscles of mouth and chin still. She said, "You've been patient. You've tried to help me. It is hopeless and useless, I suppose." She stretched out her right hand. "I thank you for what you've done. I'll have to take my chances." Spade made a growling animal noise in his throat again and sat down on the settee. "How much money have you got?" he asked. The question startled her. Then she pinched her lower lip between her teeth and answered reluctantly, "I've about $500 left." "Give it to me." She hesitated, looking timidly at him. He made angry gestures with his mouth, eyebrows, hands, and shoulders. She went into the bedroom, returning almost immediately with a sheaf of paper money wrapped in one hand. He took the money from her, counted it, and said, "There's only 400 here." "I had to keep some to live on," she explained meekly, putting a hand to her breast. "Can't you get any more?" "No." "You must have something you can raise money on," he insisted. "I've some rings, a little jewelry. You'll have to hock 'em," he said, and held out his hand. "The Remedials, the best place, on Mission and Fifth." She looked pleadingly at him. His yellow-gray eyes were hard and implacable. Slowly she put her hand inside the neck of her dress, brought out a slender roll of bills, and put them in his waiting hand. He smoothed the bills out and counted them, 4 20s, 4 10s, and a 5. He returned 2 of the 10s and the 5 to her. The others he put in his pocket. Then he stood up and said, "I'm going out. I'll see what I can do for you. I'll be back as soon as I can, with the best news I can manage. I'll ring 4 times, long, short, so you'll know it's me. You needn't go to the door with me. I can let myself in." He left her standing in the center of the floor, looking after him with dazed blue eyes. Spade went into the reception room, whose door bore the legend of Wise, American, and Wise. The red-haired girl at the switchboard said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Spade." "Hello, darling," he replied. "Is Sid in?" He stood beside her with his hand on her plump shoulder, and while she manipulated a plug and spoke into the mouthpiece, "Mr. Spade, to see you, Mr. Wise," she looked up at Spade. "Go right in." He squeezed her shoulder by way of acknowledgement, crossed the reception room and dully lighted the inner corridor, and passed down the corridor to a frosted glass door at its far end. He opened the frosted glass door and went into the office, where a small olive-skinned man with a tired oval face and a thin dark dotted with dandruff sat behind an immense desk on which bales of paper were heaped. The small man flourished a cold cigar stub at Spade and said, "Pull a chair around. So, Miles, the big one, last night." Neither his tired face nor his rather shrill voice held any emotion. "Uh-huh. That's what I came in about." Spade frowned and cleared his throat. "I think I'm going to have to tell a coroner to go to hell, Sid. Can I hide behind the sanctity of my client's secrets and identities and whatnot, all the same as a priest or a lawyer? Sid Wise lifted his shoulders and lowered the ends of his mouth. Why not? An inquest is not a court trial. You can try anyway. You've gotten away with more than this before. I know, but Dundee's getting snotty and maybe it is a little bit thick this time. Get your hat, Sid, and we'll go see the right people. I want to be safe. Sid Wise looked at the papers massed on his desk and groaned, but he got up from his chair and went to the closet by the window. You're a son of a gun, Sammy, he said as he took his hat from a hook. Spade returned to his office at 10 minutes past 5 that evening. Effie Perrine was sitting at her desk, reading Time. Spade sat at the desk and asked, Anything stirring? Not here. You look like you swallowed the canary. He grinned contentedly. I think we've got a future. I always had an idea that if Miles would go off and die somewhere, we'd stand a better chance of thriving. Will you take care of sending flowers for me? I did. You're an invaluable angel. How's your woman's intuition today? Why? What do you think of Wonderly? I'm for her, the girl replied without hesitation. She's got too many names, Spade amused. Wonderly, LeBlanc, and she says the right one's O'Shaughnessy. I don't care if she's got all the names in the phone book. That girl is all right, and you know it. I wonder. Spade blinked sleepily at Effie Perrine. He chuckled. Anyway, she's given up 700 smacks in 2 days, and that's all right. Effie Perrine sat up straight and said, Sam, if that girl's in trouble and you let her down or take advantage of it just to bleed her, I'll never forgive you, never have any respect for you as long as I live. Spade smiled unnaturally. Then he frowned. The frown was unnatural. He opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of someone's entrance through the corridor stopped him. Effie Perrine rose and went to the outer office. Spade took off his hat and sat in his chair. The girl returned with an engraved card, which read, Mr. Joel Cairo. This guy is queer, she said. In with him then, darling, said Spade. Mr. Joel Cairo was a small-boned, dark man of medium height. His hair was black and smooth and very glossy. His features were levantine, a square-cut ruby, its sides paralleled by 4 baguette diamonds, gleamed against the deep green of his cravat. His black coat, cut tight to narrow shoulders, flared a little over the slightly plump hips. His trousers fitted his round legs more snugly than was the current fashion. The uppers of his patent leather shoes were hidden by fawn spats. He held a black derby in a chamois-gloved hand and came toward Spade with a short, menacing, bobbing steps. The fragrance of perfume came with him. Spade inclined his head towards his visitor and then at a chair, saying, Sit down, Mr. Cairo. Cairo bowed elaborately over his hat, said, I thank you, in a high-pitched, thin voice, and sat down. He sat down primly, crossing his ankles, placing his hat on his knees, and began to draw off his yellow gloves. Spade rocked back in his chair and asked, Now, what can I do for you, Mr. Cairo? The amiable negligence of his tone, his motion in the chair were precisely as they had been when he had addressed the same question to Bridget O'Shaughnessy on the previous day. Cairo turned his hat over, dropping his gloves into it, and placed it in the bottom on the corner of the desk nearest him. Diamonds twinkled on the second and fourth finger of his left hand, a ruby that matched the one on his tie even to the surrounding diamonds on the third finger of his right hand. His hands were soft and well cared for. Though they were not large, their flaccid bluntness made them seem clumsy. He rubbed his palms together and said, over the whispering sound they made, May a stranger offer condolences for your partner's unfortunate death? Thanks. May I ask, Mr. Spade, if there was, as the newspapers inferred, a certain relationship between that unfortunate happening and the death a little later in the man Thursby. Spade said nothing in a blank-faced, definite way. Cairo rose and bowed. I beg your pardon, sir. He sat down and placed his hands side by side, palms down on the corner of the desk. More than idle curiosity made me ask that, Mr. Spade. I am trying to recover an ornament that has been, shall we say, mislaid. I thought and hoped you could assist me. Spade nodded, with his eyebrows lifted to indicate attentiveness. The ornament is a statuette, Cairo went on, selecting and mouthing his words carefully. The black figure of a bird. Spade nodded again, and with courteous interest. I am prepared to pay, on behalf of the figure's rightful owner, the sum of $5,000 for its recovery. Cairo raised one hand from the desk corner and touched a spot in the air with a broad nailed tip of an ugly forefinger. I am prepared to promise that. What is the phrase? No questions asked. He put his hand on the desk again beside the other and smiled blandly over them at the private detective. $5,000's a lot of money, Spade commented, looking thoughtfully at Cairo. Fingers drummed lightly on the door. When Spade had called, "Come in," the door opened far enough to admit Effie Perrine's head and shoulders. She had put on a small dark felt hat and a dark coat with gray fur collar. "Is there anything else?" she asked. "No. Good night. Lock the door when you go out, will you?" Spade turned in his chair and faced Cairo again, saying, "It's an interesting figure." The sound of the corridor doors closing behind Effie Perrine came to them. Cairo smiled and took a short, compact, flat black pistol out of an inner pocket. "You will please," he said, "clasp your hands together at the back of your head." And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 4. I think we're going to stop there. It's kind of a nice little cliffhanger for us to end on tonight. We will continue with the Maltese Falcon tomorrow night to begin chapter 5. Thank you for joining me. This has been Indiana Holmes. Love to you all, and good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.